great to be here.
Let me see that I get this rather jaw-breaking title. Project Coordinator, Environmental Studies, Oberlin College, right?
That's about right.
That's impressive. You're a graduate of Oberlin College, class of '93, correct?
That's right.
And you came from Colorado originally?
Originally, yeah.
How did you get to Oberlin? How did that happen?
Well, actually I have a friend who was a professor of the Conservatory of Music. He's a friend of mine in Colorado. And he actually also is a professor at Princeton University, which is where my father wanted me to go. And not being one to want to go to the Ivy Leagues, I decided to come to Oberlin. And this friend of mine who was the conservatory professor here said that I'd fit in much more in Oberlin than I would in Princeton. So I think in retrospect it was a good decision.
You don't regret it?
Not at all.
And then you came back here in what year?
Came back for more.
Okay, came back.
1995.
95. So you were out. What did you do in those 2 years?
Actually, I went back to Colorado, where I spent my whole life, and I worked for the Rocky Mountain chapter of the Sierra Club out there.
Yes.
And coordinated some volunteer projects, and actually had an opportunity to get to know Colorado a lot more. Traveled around the state a lot. Spent a lot of time in the mountains. And also in the deserts in the western part of the state, where the Sierra Club was waging a major campaign to preserve some wilderness areas.
Now, where's your hometown there?
My hometown's Golden, Colorado.
Where's that?
Which is,
in relation to Denver, where would that be?
Relation to Denver, Golden's about 15 miles northwest of Denver.
Okay.
And it's the home of the Coors Brewery, which is, I'm not sure if it's our claim to fame or our claim to infamy, but...
Everybody gets free samples occasionally? Or?
Yeah, if you go through the whole tour, you get a free sample at the end.
Okay, tell us something about this job that you have here. What does it entail? What do you do as project coordinator?
Well, it has a variety of facets to it. I spend a lot of time working with students, coordinating student projects, and really trying to find ways for students to gain hands-on experience in environmental fields. And originally I was hired in August of 1995 to help to coordinate the design process for the Environmental Studies Center.
Which we'll get to in a little bit.
Which we'll get to in more detail, I'm sure. And basically my job at that time was to attempt to pull together students, faculty, staff, local residents, city folks, and so forth, to really kind of brainstorm and come up with ideas for what this Environmental Studies Center would do. And then in the last year and a half or so, my job has evolved to focus on identifying ways to bridge the academic curriculum of the Environmental Studies program with the local community. So that's pretty much what I'm focusing on now. And as I mentioned, a lot of my time is spent working with students. I work with a lot of faculty members as well, identifying new courses or ways for students to do research projects that tie into local issues. And
this is called interdisciplinary. Is that the word
right.
I want?
That's the big buzzword.
Is that the buzzword I've got?
Yes.
Okay. Could you, why don't we start off on this environmental studies business by your defining what it means. What is environmental studies?
Environmental studies, well, as we've already determined, it's an interdisciplinary program. And basically it was set up originally to look at the relationship between humans and human societies in the natural environment. And as an interdisciplinary program, we were interested in looking at the scientific aspects of that relationship through the traditional disciplines of biology, chemistry, geology, physics. We're interested in the social sciences aspects in terms of political systems, economics, and environmental issues, and so forth, as well as the humanities, philosophy, history, English. So the Environmental Studies program is really a broad-based program to look at how all these different academic disciplines concern themselves with this relationship between humans and the natural environment. And of course a major impetus for starting the program to begin with was an overriding concern about the effects that human beings are having on the natural environment and beginning to identify what we need to do differently to reduce those impacts. So that's really I'd say the nature of the program and kind of the definition of environmental studies.
So is there in the major itself, would there be prescribed courses, or would the person build his or her own curriculum with all these other departments?
It's actually a pretty demanding major. Students are required to take 30 total credit hours within the major. Half of those credit hours, 15, apply to courses in the natural sciences, including introductory courses in biology, physics, geology, chemistry, and so forth, as well as some advanced work in the sciences. And in addition, the other 15 hours have to be taken from the humanities and social sciences. And the environmental studies program is actually involves, I think approximately 20 different academic departments on campus. And there are several professors who offer courses within their traditional disciplines that are so-called cross-listed with environmental studies courses. So we have, for example, a seminar on nature writing. We have courses on American environmental history, the suburbanization of America, which is an issue that's pretty significant to the county here. Have courses on the geology of earth processes, conservation biology, and so forth. So the program is really draws on a lot of these other academic programs for its strength. And then a student's going to go through this program and have a pretty wide exposure to these different disciplinary perspectives applied to environmental issues.
And I imagine what we called, when I was in college, political science, I believe is now called politics.
That's right. Used to be government here.
Would be something that you would have some exposure to, since you're going to be working through the political system.
Right.
Am I right on that?
That's right. Actually, I majored in politics and environmental studies as a student here.
And it's a fairly new department here, I gather, in program. Roughly.
Actually, it's a fairly old program. It was initiated in 1978.
Oh, that far back.
An Oberlin College student was concerned with these. There's more and more information coming out during the 1970s about the effects of human society on the natural environment. We're seeing a lot more toxic pollution issues. Our air quality is poor. The Cuyahoga River was catching on fire. So there were a lot of very dramatic expressions of environmental calamity. And an Oberlin College student in '78 said, that the institution should make some more effort to concern itself with this issue and provide students with more of an ability to study this issue. So I did a winter term project, actually, and pulled together several faculty members from different disciplines. And I think David Brower, actually, if I recall correctly, was a part of this process too. He came in and gave a lecture and spent some time with the students. And out of this winter term course, 4 faculty members, 3 of whom are still here, actually, got independent grant funding to develop courses in environmental studies. Clayton Coppice, who's the current dean, developed his course in American environmental history. Larry Buell is pretty renowned scholar. He's with Harvard now, but he started a course on American literature and the environment. David Egloff developed a course on ecology and the environment. Harlan Wilson began to look into connections between political theory and environmental issues. So out of the efforts of these faculty members came some new courses in environmental studies. And then eventually they decided to create a whole program around this area, and more faculty members over the years have gotten involved.
I can't resist but comment that was not a very good period for Cleveland in a number of ways, and at about not too distant from that river catching fire, the mayor set his hair on fire, and that became international news. So I'm not sure.
Too much hair tonic?
Well, no, he was cutting a ribbon of steel bar, or a ribbon of some kind, which was steel, and he had it acetylene torch, and he either raised it up or something, and it caught fire. I've forgotten just how it happened. His hair caught fire, and he didn't realize it right away, and of course everybody was panicking, and happened to be in Europe right after that happened, and that's what everybody wanted. So, oh, you come from where the mayor sets his house, so his hair on fire. It was but I'm not sure that comes under environmental protection or anything. Is this a fairly popular thing now on other campuses as well? Is this
becoming much more
in
so?
the country?
I think we're fortunate at Oberlin. We've got 20 years of history with the environmental studies program here.
You've got David Orr, which is a real
David Orr,
priceless
a real
asset,
major asset to the program too. And actually, he spends a lot of time visiting other campuses around the country and working with other campuses who just now are beginning the START environmental studies program. So he's offering some perspectives in terms of how we set up our program here and how we operate. And it's actually getting to the point where we had some people who drove out from Kent State University, and also some people who are coming up here from Hiram College. David Orr is becoming so busy with all these visits to other campuses that he's actually having campuses come here to visit us here because he doesn't have the time to go.
Does he do some teaching?
I'm sorry?
Does he do some teaching actually in the classroom?
David Orr?
Yes.
Oh, yes, yeah. He teaches, he's a full-time faculty member.
Yes, I knew that. I just didn't know whether
five courses.
Oh, well, heavy load.
He did go a half-time for a year and a half when we were raising the funds for the building, and we got a replacement professor for his course.
Is there talk of adding another professor?
Yeah, actually, that's a major priority right now for the college. We recently received the highest priority ranking for an addition to staff, and we're looking at a geography professor, someone who can look at natural science and social science issues related to land use, which of course is a topic that would have major local significance here.
Many years ago, they had a geography department, and then they let that go in the 60s. And it's nice to know it's a little bit aspect of that will come back, yes. How many majors have you got?
We've got over 80 at this point.
My word.
Yeah, we're the 5th largest major on campus, so we're quite popular.
And I imagine others taking the courses as well. That is,
non-majors, yeah.
Who are not majors.
If I remember correctly, I think about 700 students or so are exposed to environmental studies courses at some point in their Oberlin career. So it's about 1/4 of the student body.
Now, let's say that I graduate this May with an environmental studies major. What would I look forward to in career opportunities?
Well, it's pretty varied. I mean, the program itself is interdisciplinary, so and traditionally a lot of students actually combine their environmental studies major with majors in biology or politics or other traditional disciplines. It's pretty interesting. I was actually just looking through an alumni list to see where all the different majors of environmental studies would go, seeing if there was kind of a common theme, and it's very diverse. I mean, we had a lot of students that went into farming, interestingly enough, starting farms or working on community-supported agriculture farms, similar to what we have here in Oberlin. A lot of students go on to law, environmental policy. There are quite a few students that were in the private sector doing environmental consulting, things like that, compliance officers for corporations. Students oftentimes go into teaching too, in education and environmental education. That's a pretty popular field for a lot of the graduates.
Good. Is this getting into the secondary schools at all?
Yeah, actually well, environmental studies is becoming much more popular within the schools. There's a lot more effort to incorporate environmental education into classrooms, and there are a lot of curriculums that have been developed. And actually, the environmental studies program here is running a watershed education program where we have Oberlin College students that are going into local classrooms to teach students about the Black River watershed and to try to give them more of a sense of connection to their own local place. And that's where we see is the major starting point to make students more aware of environmental issues. Is to
what grade level do they do this?
We're actually doing a K through 12, and we're working with 7th generation to develop a whole K through 12 curriculum.
Wonderful.
It's an effort that'll probably take about 3 years. This spring, actually, we're going to work with schools in the Oberlin school system to develop this program, K through 12, all age levels.
Take them on field trips, things of that sort.
And we have an actual class in the environmental studies program. About 16 Oberlin College students are a part of, and they'll actually work individually with teachers to develop these different lesson plans and activities, and take kids out on field trips or take them around Plum Creek, so they can learn more about what's going on in their own local place.
That sounds great. Practically speaking, what would you say the effect of environmental studies is on the nation right now? Where are we in?
The effects of our program on the nation?
No, in general. Well, yes, as a part of it, but generally environmental studies, quote unquote, at the moment is having some impact. I gather.
I think a lot of it. I mean, as I mentioned, there's much more popularity amongst students in this generation to major in environmental studies or to take courses in environmental science and so forth. And I think there's kind of a new approach too that's becoming more popular that David Orr is really a major national advocate for, and that's this whole idea of ecological design. And ecological design is really more of a process you go through where you determine how to develop human settlements, agricultural operations, industries, institutions, and so forth that are adapted to and integrated with their own local environments and do not have any extended environmental impacts. And a lot of that's what we're trying to do with the Environmental Studies Center here. But I think that this approach is becoming more popular. And basically what it is it's an approach to give students some conceptual tools so that they can understand environmental impacts and how to create and design systems that actually do not have environmental impacts. And I think as more students are exposed to this kind of thinking, we're going to see a lot more changes in agriculture and business and teaching and so forth that where attempts are made to really change the way that we design our very systems that sustain our lives in ways that are not in any way detrimental to the environment.
Now you're going to center this whole thing in Oberlin very soon in a new building.
Right.
Environmental Studies Building. Does it have a name yet, or is it still Environmental Studies Building?
It's the actual official name is the Adam Joseph Lewis Center for Environmental Studies.
He's the one that gave a rather large chunk of money.
The philanthropist that gave $3 million to the
from Cleveland. Is he from Cleveland?
He's Cleveland-based. Yeah,
Cleveland-based. Okay, so it's the Lewis Building, really, or center, or whatever. Okay, tell us. Let's see. Let's break this down. Date of construction. When do they hope to begin it?
At this point, we're looking at a June construction date, June of this year.
Breaking ground.
Breaking ground, that's right.
And the location?
The building itself is going to be located just south of Harkness Co-op, which is, Harkness defines a bowl that Talcott Cottage and Baldwin Cottage are also a part of. It's just to the south of the main campus. On the south side of College Street.
Facing Elm, right?
It's going to be facing Elm Street.
And how far back, roughly, from Elm will it be? Would you guess?
I don't remember.
Approximately.
I don't recall what the exact setback is. It's 50, 100 feet. But there'll be some space between the Environmental Studies Center and Harkness Co-op, probably about maybe 150 feet or so, where we'll have some vegetable gardens and small orchards and things like that.
And what's the completion date? Have they got any? When do they hope to be using?
At this point, we're looking at about a one-year turnaround time. So according to our current schedule, the building will be ready to be occupied by the fall of 1999.
Great.
So, just in time for the millennia.
And I have down here size and height. It's a fairly, from the plans, looks like it's a rather long building.
That's right.
About 2 stories high.
It's 2 stories. It's about 14,000 square feet. And it's a long building on the east-west axis. In other words, we want to have a large amount of southern exposure so we can take maximum advantage of the sun, which you need to do here in Oberlin, take maximum advantage of the sun when it happens to be shining. And that the sunlight will be used for electricity production as well as for heating the building.
Now, tell us a little bit what that building will have in it, or how it will be constructed, that is different from other Oberlin College buildings.
Well, as I mentioned before, we're really developing this idea of ecological design, which is, as I said, it's developing buildings and systems that are integrated and adapted to their local environments. And the building is really an attempt to provide us with live-in curriculum in ecological design. And I think we've taken a lot of the traditional design assumptions that might have informed a lot of the buildings on campus. For example, the availability of cheap and readily accessible fossil fuels, or the idea that energy is not a concern, that we can squander energy and not worry about it. So this building is very, very concerned with how we use energy, maximizing energy efficiency, maximizing the amount of energy we can produce from the sun, It's also doing other things. We're looking at materials in the building shell itself. We're looking at doing pretty much a full cost accounting or a full audit trail of all the materials we use in the building. So the materials we choose will have the most marginal environmental impacts. We're looking at clay bricks that are produced locally here within the region for that. Another difference is going to be much more of an attempt to reduce this distinction between outdoors and indoors. So when you're in the building itself, there'll be a lot of windows looking out into the outdoors. You'll have much more of a connection to what's going on outside. I think another major difference is going to be the presence of what's called a living machine, which is an indoor aquatic ecosystem that processes all of the sewage waste in the building. And this living machine concept has been developed for quite some time. M&M's Mars Corporation actually has one to process their industrial sludge. So it's been pretty well developed, and it helps us maintain one of the principles we had for the building, which is clean water in, clean water out. So all of the sewage waste will be processed on site and actually provide an environment for the growth of these different aquatic ecosystems. And then the landscaping around the building itself, too, will in various ways reflect the indigenous character of this place. We'll have native trees, oaks and maples, elms and so forth. We'll have some native shrubs. One of our guiding principles is to produce habitat for songbirds. So we're hoping to put in some shrubs and some trees that will provide habitat to attract local birds. We'll have a small wetland, as well as some areas to produce food. So it's really taking what currently is pretty much a vacant spot on campus and a dead spot and turning it into something that's vibrant and full of life.
Sounds rather fascinating. Do you have a feeling that it will have an impact, depending on how the building works out in its first year, 2 or 3, will have an impact on the architecture of and design of other college buildings?
I think it will.
Particularly, I'm thinking of the science complex, which is supposed to begin in the year 2000 or something like that.
Yeah, and we've been meeting with some of the people involved with the development of the science building and trying to find some different ways that the technology that's been developed in the Environmental Studies Center can possibly be imported to the Science Center. I think there's a lot of opportunities there. And also, we have NASA very heavily involved with their building project. They're assisting with the development of what are called photovoltaic panels, which are panels that will be on the roof that convert sunlight to electricity. And they've actually developed an electricity production process through these photovoltaic panels that I think was pretty heavily involved with their space program for a while for operating satellites. But it involves, ironically, sulfur that is a byproduct from coal combustion that's been scrubbed out of the combustion of coal. The sulfur is used in the production of these solar panels, and the panels themselves are twice as efficient as current solar panels, which makes them very economical. And they're also very thin. They're about the width of a transparency that you'd use on an overhead. So they're very, very portable. So NASA is pretty heavily involved with this, also looking at the possibility of what's called a hydrogen fuel cell, which could store electricity that's produced in the summer for use in the winter.
I was going to ask you if you're planning to have the building totally solar heated.
The heating actually itself, we're going to use what solar we can in the winter. Of course, that's a little more challenging because, as anyone knows who lives here, it's quite cloudy in the winter time. But we still will take advantage of what sunlight does come in the summer. And the specifics on the heating system are still being worked out. But one mechanism that's been investigated is geothermal heat, where you basically use the ambient ground temperature, which at a certain depth is between 55 and 65 degrees. And you pass ethylene glycol through that, and then use that. Use an exchanger to use that ambient ground temperature to maintain a constant temperature in the building.
But I wondered if you'd be doing, when you spoke of the storage cells, I wondered if you'd be doing some of that also.
Yeah, that's more for electricity storage.
That's just for electricity.
Right.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I imagine we could take a break about now, couldn't we? And so let's take a quick break, and then we'll be right back.
Okay.
These days, the media seems to move faster than ever. No sooner does something happen than the TV cameras are there covering it. There before almost anyone else. Almost. Please support the American Red Cross. The need is real. The time is now. Help can't wait.
Welcome back. Our guest is Brad Masi, who's a very important person in the Environmental Studies program at Oberlin, and we will be very pleased to field any telephone calls you might have if you have any questions about any of this. In the meantime, let's switch gears slightly, but to something that is tied in, and that is what is now a very popular term in Oberlin, sustainable development.
Yes.
And it meshes right in, doesn't it, with environmental.
That's right.
Could you define that for us? This is the night of definitions.
Yes. Sustainable development is one of those terms, too, that's just thrown around so much it almost defies easy definition. But I think it originally came from the Brundtland Commission, which is a United Nations commission, which in the late 1980s came out with a report called Our Common Future, looking at the future of environmental problems. And they defined sustainable development as development that meets the needs of current generations without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And I think that's kind of maybe the most traditional definition that's come out. I guess I see sustainable development as a little more complex than that. I'd see sustainable development as basically addressing three things. It would be development that, first of all, is compatible with environmental conditions. In other words, it's development that does not pollute the air, does not pollute the water, that allows natural systems to thrive, like wetlands and woodlands and so forth. I think that's one component of sustainable development, is the environmental. The second component is economic, and I think economic sustainability really resides more in creating more opportunities for local economic development, or another way of putting it is trying to find ways to keep more of our dollars circulating in the local economy. And then I think the third aspect of sustainable development is a social aspect. It has to build community. It has to enhance community values. Has to increase the level of civic engagement that people have, so they have meaningful access to political processes. And it also, I think the community aspect is people need to feel connected to their place or to their landscape in significant ways. So that's perhaps a bit of a broader definition, but I think sustainable development needs to take into account environmental health, economic vitality, and community stability.
Now, I know the Oberlin city government is involved in this and in an exploration right now of using methane gas from Browning Ferris landfill.
Right.
Whether that will go anywhere or not, we don't know yet. Whether it be economically viable. And I suppose that's a problem, isn't it, about this at this point? How much is it going to cost you to do this? And when we get into this with recycling, which is really a part of this, isn't it? And that it's sometimes too expensive to recycle.
That's right.
We haven't got a national trend enough to use things as we perhaps should be doing.
That's right. But
how else might Oberlin tie into this besides, let's say, energy?
Well, I think that several of the things that the Environmental Studies program has made a partnership with the City of Oberlin to look at the idea of sustainable development, and I think from our end what we're interested in doing is finding ways for students to get some more practical experience working on conducting research that would be of benefit to the city and to the citizens here on sustainable development issues. In addition to energy, we've got two students actually that are working with the Oberlin Municipal Light and Utility program to do an energy conservation program with local residents. And the other program we're working on right now is a community gardening program. And we're actually working with Eastwood Elementary School right now to create a space. Actually, this is at the initiation of a second grade teacher named Sarah Lee. She wanted to have an environmental space in her schoolyard property that would combine food production with native plants and shrubs to attract butterflies and things like that. So she could use that for her second graders. And in response to that, we've developed a bunch of student interest in the community garden project, as well as a wide range of community interest. And we had a meeting in December. About 40 people from the college in town came to begin to talk about how we could create a community garden program at Eastwood Elementary School, sort of as a starting point, with the idea being that hopefully that could stimulate garden projects at other schools and neighborhoods and so forth.
The trick is to keep it going during the summer, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's exactly why we wanted to get community involvement, is because we need to maintain this program in the summer when school's not in session. And actually, there's a school in Penfield that just started a community garden project, and it's similar circumstance, a K through 4 school in their case. But they've had very wide participation amongst parents in this program, and they actually are groups of parents are signing up to help to water and weed this garden in the summer, and then the kids can can go in there and harvest the food. And actually, what we'd like to do here is create a connection with the Oberlin farm market, so that some of the kids that are involved with this garden project could actually sell their produce to Oberlin residents at the farm market.
That would not only help people who are buying, but it would give them an idea of how this economically works.
That's right.
Here is a sort of a challenging thought question. There are people now, and I'm sure there will be in the future, who will honestly feel that in the long run this isn't going to be effective in real life.
Well, I guess
you get this probably frequently, don't you?
Yeah, and I guess my response to that
I was going to say,
go ahead.
You have a response, I'm sure, and that's why I set this up, because I'm sure you would. And this is a question we hear sometimes in the city. What's all this anyway? Why are we worrying about this?
Well, I think for starters, I think just from a general level, I mean, sustainable development is about real life. I mean, that is real life. And I think on a macro scale, we see a case, for example, with a lot of the timbering that's occurring in the Pacific Northwest. Those timber resources are really what you might term as natural capital. I mean, a healthy forest is natural capital to the extent that it renewably produces trees and timber products and so forth. And when you clear cut it, I see that as an example of liquidating your natural capital. It would be like a factory, destroying a portion of its capital, to sell it off to make, some kind of short-term
And that's a very
profit.
Alarming trend in the third world.
That's right. And we see it in the third world,
Watch the fires in Indonesia have been an example of what or Brazil's another one, isn't it? The disaster,
right?
In the Amazon Valley. Am I right? Am I on track here with this? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are other examples of that. And I think the effects that we see in the Pacific Northwest too are we're not providing long-term job stability for the people that work there. And in addition to that, we're affecting the salmon industry. We're affecting a whole other industry. So to me, I'd look at sustainable development in a situation like that as providing an alternative that, as I mentioned, protects the environment and also provides more long-term job security. I'd say looking locally here, sustainable development, by and large, would be a more careful accounting of how we spend our money. If you take $1 that we spend traditionally on food, and buy some produce, the average produce travels 1,300 miles to get from the farm to our plate. So when we spend $1 on food that's coming 1,300 miles away, that dollar is going right out of this local economy. But if we spend $1 at the Oberlin farm market, that money is staying here in the local economy. It's benefiting local farmers. It's benefiting local people. So more of that money is able to circulate in this local economy. And actually, some Oberlin students did a study a few years back looking at what would happen if Oberlin College itself purchased more of its food from local farmers. And they determined for every $1 that Oberlin College would spend buying local food, an additional $2 to $3 would be produced in the local economy. So I would say that sustainable development is really about the long-term economic health of this place. So I guess I'd respond to people who have concerns about the viability of sustainable development in the long term. I'd say global environmental conditions are such that we're going to have to pursue more sustainable development for one thing, but I think for another, we'll realize a lot of benefits out of that, keeping more of our money local.
Where do you see this whole thing, the status of sustainable development, say, being in 10 years? How will it be different in 10 years?
I think as you mentioned earlier, for example, the recycling is expensive right now, and I think that's because the market hasn't fully developed for recycling products, and the industrial processes haven't fully developed for accepting recycled goods. I'd say 10 years from now, we're going to see a lot more advancement in recycling technologies and demands for recycled products. I think in energy, the solar panels that we're going to have on the Environmental Studies Center are going to operate twice as efficient as typical solar panels today, and actually will be competitive with coal as a power source. So I think we're going to see much wider distributed energy through solar photovoltaics, methane production, and landfills, and so forth. So I think we're going to see a lot of progress in the next 10 years.
Good, good. Have you suggestions about how citizens can become more involved in sustainable development?
Well, I think that...
I bet you do.
I think I have a few suggestions. I mean, I think first and foremost, sustainable development or environmental responsibility needs to be a personal lifestyle choice that people make. And I think there are several options that people could do. And I'll just run down a few quick ones. I'd say first, people should buy an energy conservation kit from some of the local merchants that are selling them, Ben Franklin's, Watson's Hardware, IGA, and I think Missler's, in the co-op bookstore. These energy kits can enable people to reduce their energy use, their water use, and also save money. I'd say a second thing, people should plant gardens or get involved with community gardens or the school-based garden at Eastwood. I'd say a third thing, and a big piece of sustainable development would be to support our local merchants, support the local downtown. I think this downtown economy sees some major threats from increasing strip mall development on the periphery. So I think a major piece of sustainable development would be the support of local merchants. And for example, when I have a CD or a book that I need to buy, if the co-op bookstore doesn't have it, I'll order it from them and buy it from them anyway, because the co-op bookstore, for example, has a lot of local ties and is a real asset to this community. So I think that by looking at our purchasing choices, that's a major piece of sustainable development.
And it, by the way, sells recycled items, doesn't it?
That's right. They do have
sustainable items.
Some sustainable items. In the restaurant, the Two Trees restaurant, they use some products that come from local farmers. So I think the co-op bookstore really makes a lot of efforts. I'm not trying to single them out. And I'd say the final thing people should do is to join a co-op too. We have a lot of co-op businesses in town, and I think that cooperatives, like the cable co-op here, provide a way for citizens to have more control over their local economic institutions. So those are the suggestions that I would come up with.
That's good. Let me ask you this. Where do you see yourself 10 years from now? Are you going to still be in this, or are you going to be something? What would you like to be? If you could do anything you wanted to be 10 years from now, that's the year 2000, whatever.
The 2008, I guess.
Eight,
yeah,
yes,
it's hard to
it would.
believe. We'll be 8 years into the millennium.
I'm not adjusted yet. My own mental computer has not programmed this yet. But where would you like to be? Still in Oberlin or somewhere else?
I guess if I could define the ideal job, it would be something along the lines of Henry David Thoreau and living in a cabin somewhere writing. But I don't know if I'll get to that point. I definitely plan on pursuing sustainable development. Not sure. I've got funding to stay here through 1999, and I'd like to see the building go up and see some of these projects to completion, or at least make sure that they continue.
Would you like to do some teaching, or would you like to do some writing, all of these things?
Yeah, I'm interested in teaching. I'm interested in writing. I'm also interested in just being involved wherever I live, if that's here, being an active member of a community. And that's one thing I like about living in Oberlin. It's a very easy place to be an active member.
Oh, yes, very much so.
There's a wide opportunity for civic engagement here and being involved with local politics and local projects.
Any final comments you'd like to share with People in TV land out there.
Not that I can think of. We're going to have some upcoming events, so I encourage people to take advantage of speakers. We're going to have a forum on March 3rd looking at development issues in the county. We're going to have a conference on sustainable development, kind of a second conference in early April. So I encourage people to attend these conferences.
Is that going to be different from the one that was last spring?
Yeah, the one last spring we focused more broadly on sustainable development, looking at energy, economic renewal, and land use. This upcoming conference is going to focus a bit more on urban renewal, this idea of urban renewal, focusing on Oberlin, Lorain, Elyria, some of the major urban centers in the county, and how we can renew urban areas as an alternative to this sprawling mega development that we see happening all around our farmlands.
And as the groundbreaking and what did you say, June?
In June.
Is that going to be a big
That'll be a
big
event,
bash?
so
we'll hear a lot about that. People can come to that.
Absolutely.
That sounds great. Well, Dave, we thank you so much. This time has really gone by very rapidly.
Yes, it
it's
has.
amazing. We appreciate so much your being here. We're going to give you a tape of the show.
All right.
And so that you'll have it for posterity. And we want you to have one of our official conversations with Lothrop mugs.
All right.
And you
Great.
can have recycled water only in, in the future. And we thank you so much.
Recycled Black River water.
Yeah, and
Right.
or from in the building, in the environmental
in the building.
science building. And we thank you so much for being here tonight.
Well, thanks for
thank
having
you
me.
so much for joining us this evening. And we hope to be back the last Thursday in February. And we'll have another very interesting guest for you at that time. This is Dick Lothrop saying thank you very much for joining us, and good night.